Have you ever arrived in a new place and felt kind of out of place? Like you were an outsider or even an invader, almost like a Trojan horse? Yeah? This is not a motivational speech on how to feel like you fit in or how to feel less of the imposter syndrome. This is a talk about leveraging interdisciplinarity, especially in the world of business education. You see, I'm a professor of business/marketing, but I didn't study business or marketing. I studied political and social sciences, and when I was first hired in a business school, I definitely felt that outsider perspective. Almost felt like an invader, because I came in with my ideas of social and environmental justice and economic justice, and to my surprise, unfortunately, I noticed that there was very little emphasis on that in mainstream business curriculum back in the day. So that was disappointing, but fast forward, and in 2021, right after or kind of during the pandemic, I went on a big journey. Quite literally, I did a road trip of over 10,000 miles all around the United States in a self-remodeled, as off-the-grid as possible RV to study intentional living communities, aka eco-villages, and sustainable businesses. So what I learned from this long journey, this road trip, is twofold. On the one side, the sustainable consumption perspective, I interviewed people living in these eco-villages or these intentional living communities. And even though they vary widely based on size and location and how close to the city they are and their democratic or more benevolent dictatorship governance model, they do have something very strongly in common, and that is that they all center around harmony with nature, closer connection with other human beings, and consuming more sustainably, consuming more ethically, and more minimally. So based on that research, I learned that sustainable consumption is really possible, and even more so, people are thriving. And one quote I wanted to share with you that one of these people in eco-villages told me is that, "How can I take more than I need when others have less than they need?" And that always stuck with me. Now, on the other side, the sustainable business side, I interviewed executives and founders of certified B corporations. And certified B corporations are basically for-profit organizations, but they're structured under a benefit corporation legal structure. So they don't have to stick to shareholder primacy as their driving force in their business. They can actually be much more value-driven. And so interviewing these executives and these founders, I noticed how much heart and soul they put into building or embedding sustainability into the DNA of their business from the start. And a lot of these businesses are very successful. The B Corp movement is growing, so it really shows that sustainable business is, again, very possible. Now, besides what consumers can do or not do, and what businesses can or cannot do, of course, these two agents cannot be the only driving forces to fix an unsustainable world. We also have to look at what the government can do. Think of top-down legislation. But even these three agents are not enough to fix an unsustainable world. And of course, as an academic, I'm biased, so I'm looking at the role of academia, what academia can do or should do to help support a transition to a more just and sustainable economy. And within academia, I'm especially looking at business education because, I mean, let's be real, business has a real impact on our society, both environmentally as well as socially. And this impact is not always that good. We see that business as usual is simply unsustainable. Most predictive models, and I know predictive modeling is very hard, but they show that even under the more optimistic scenarios, we're definitely still not on track to reach the Paris Climate Agreement. And this is an agreement, these are goals that we set for ourselves. So things must go differently. We must do things differently and rethink the way we extract and exploit and consume and produce and pollute in our society. Let's take a closer look at corporations, because under the dominant economic model of capitalism, corporations are really the cell, the driving force in society. Our modern economic life and our social life, it almost entirely depends on what corporations produce for us. Everything, almost everything we wear or eat, or the laptops and phones we use on a daily basis are the product of corporations. So, I mean, giving corporations credit where credit is due, they're pretty good at transforming natural resources into wealth and into products and conveniences for us, right? They're exploiting natural resources to get to products and services for people. But the problem is that this type of extraction comes with a lot of externalities. And externalities are basically the sum of all negative effects on society due to business processes. And these externalities can be huge. So on the one side, on the plus side, we do see that corporations created immense conveniences and wealth and products for people. But on the other side, we see that this wealth creation has been lopsided, at best even. Under capitalism, or shareholder capitalism especially, we see that there's huge increases in wealth inequality, especially in the United States. And then we also see that there's been exploitation of workers because of that principle of profit first. We see a dire environmental impact. And we even see that corporations have grown so powerful that they can control governments to some extent, that they outgrow the control of governments through, think of, for example, tax cuts, campaign financing, through super PACs and so on. So we must be able to do better. And these externalities, to some extent, have been absorbed by the planet and by people for a long, long time. Under almost 200 years of shareholder capitalism, or capitalism as a driving force, the sheer size of our oceans and the abundance of land and resources and the resilience of our people have allowed, to some extent, for these effects to be absorbed. But of course, we start seeing the delayed effects now, the delayed social and environmental impact. And therefore, we start thinking like, hey, maybe we should rethink this whole economic model. Maybe we should rethink shareholder capitalism as a dominant paradigm in business. And I think it's the moral duty of business education to help make that change. You see, students are ready for this. Students are asking for this. There's this tension between knowing and caring about sustainability, and we see that even in business students. When students care a lot about sustainability, this can come at a high cost. We see that they can sometimes fall into despair, start feeling compassion fatigue. They feel like maybe like you care so much, but you don't know how to solve the problem, you don't know how to really tackle it on your own, and that can feel really demotivating or isolating. On the other side, we also see that when people care about sustainability, it doesn't necessarily translate into knowing or understanding sustainability concepts. For example, a study by BI Norwegian Business School in Oslo, just in 2024, showed that less than a quarter of students could name a single sustainable development goal. Now, on the flip side, we do see that knowledge about sustainability drives caring. So the more people learn about sustainability, typically the more they start caring. And this is really good news. This is a strong argument for education. The power of education can be huge. Now, we also see that there's still a missing piece, because you can know and care all you want. It's implementation that really, really matters. How can we drive constructive action? How can we really drive impact? And this is tricky. I'm currently running a few studies on how consumers, specifically Gen Z, feels about sustainability and what they know, so we give them information, but it becomes very hard to measure a dependent variable that captures action or behavior change. Now, luckily, there's a couple tools in education that we can use to actually make implementation more feasible. And that is, for example, project-based learning, service learning, career bridging opportunities, case studies, and so on. So those really, really help to bridge that gap. And so I did. After that long road trip that I talked to you about earlier, I developed new curriculum. I was so inspired, and I developed a new course called Sustainable Marketing. And some people might think, oh, that's total oxymoron. Sustainable marketing is just not even possible, but it is. And I also developed Fowler College of Business sustainable consulting program for undergrads, which was back then the first in the nation. And it was lauded by students, by faculty, by administrators, and even by the business community, because this program allows students, undergrads, to use or to hone their consulting skills directly working with sustainable businesses in the community. But I wish my course did not exist. Let me explain why. Basically, when business schools start adopting sustainability curriculum, that's a huge positive step forward. I fully agree with that. However, this sustainability curriculum is typically still presented as a separate elective. And my course as well, it's an upper level elective for seniors. So basically what we tell students is, hey, this is for 4 years long while they're doing their undergrad. This is how we do business, accounting, marketing, management, and so on. Oh, and by the way, here's an elective if you want to learn how to do this sustainably. So it's juxtaposed as if it's like an afterthought, as if it's an option or just a different flavor of business. And in fact, business should always be sustainable. There's no other way. Why teach them a non-sustainable way first? So that is what I mean with we should fully integrate sustainability into business curriculum and in fact in all curriculum, because this goes for any field, any level. And I know integrating new content into existing curriculum is incredibly hard because it takes a lot of manpower. Basically, you need to revamp your entire curriculum, and it just takes a lot of work. But we've been there before. Anyone Gen Z in the audience will be shocked, but what I'm going to tell you here is that back in the day, in the early 2000s, we didn't even have digital methods or digital constructs integrated into mainstream curriculum. We had separate internet classes, at least in business. So basically what we did is we told students, hey, this is how business is done, this is how market research is done, hard copy surveys, face-to-face sales. Oh, and here's a digital way to do this. And now, of course, no one would ever consider that a separate thing. Now, digital methods are entirely integrated into all curriculum. And again, in every field, that goes for geography, think of GIS, that goes for engineering, for architecture. I mean, obviously, we have digital methods entirely embraced in our curriculum. But it took some revamping to get there, and we should get there too with sustainability. Now, if you're not convinced yet why sustainability and business are actually a really good marriage, it's because sustainability is really intersectional. It encompasses very different concepts that all form a piece of the puzzle. Think of environmental sustainability, which is what typically people think of first, but also social sustainability, social justice issues, but also economic sustainability. Think of wealth inequality, very closely related to business. And then you could even add personal sustainability in terms of physical and mental well-being. Think of burnouts and so on, which is relevant to management science. So all of these pieces of sustainability form a puzzle, and the problem is people tend to think in a very siloed way, but the world isn't naturally siloed. All these pieces are integrated, and if one of these pieces is missing, typically you see effects in other domains as well. Let me give you one example. Areas with high industrial activity or high economic activity that is polluting are areas where often there's a higher concentration of communities of color, lower socioeconomic communities. And because of that pollution, these communities experience more chronic health risks. So we see that economic activity and industry is connected to environmental sustainability, that pollution, which is in itself connected to social sustainability. Think of these communities living there, and also personal health. Think of those health risks. So this is just one example of how business truly impacts our society, sometimes in a not so great way, and we can do better. Now, if you're not convinced yet why business should fully embrace sustainability, first of all, if we want to teach for the world we want to live in, we have to help raise the next generation of business leaders. If we want to give our students a seat at the table and have them be part of the conversation of how we can shape our world, we have to, basically we're doing them a disservice if we don't teach them about sustainability. Secondly, the longer we keep relying on old models like neoliberal capitalism, trickle-down economics, the longer we're delaying progress. We should just move along, and even if we don't know exactly which model will be the best one for the future, we're talking about circular economy and so on, it's still worth exploring it and giving students that transparency and discussing these different options and different models openly with their pros and cons. And then lastly, and this is a very important one, I think, to me personally, based on what I've noticed in our student body, is that if we do not equip students with knowledge about sustainability and tools on how to implement sustainability on a daily basis, we basically let them sit with their feelings of despair without any constructive consequences or action. But if we give them those tools, they are actually able and empowered to transform those feelings of despair into constructive action. Now, how do we go about it? Of course, again, like I said, integrating sustainability into any new field is not easy. But step one would be to train faculty, to incentivize continued learning among faculty, or teachers, professors of any school or field. Secondly, you have to realize you don't have to do everything all at once. As an instructor, you can start with implementing specific examples, case studies, and so on, or maybe a field trip, and then this way start bit by bit bringing in more sustainability examples. And then lastly, you don't have to do all this alone. As an instructor, you can leverage your community, leverage networks, bring in interdisciplinary guest speakers, bring in people from the business community who can highlight how business is done sustainably, like right there and then in action. It's really uplifting for students to see that. Now, of course, all these curriculum changes have to happen within a larger supportive framework. So, of course, institutional change is essential. We need to see institutional buy-in through, for example, budget allocation and strategic planning around that as well. Now, let me leave you with this. We could never conceive of a world or a future without digital, like without our laptops and smartphones, right? Well, we also do not have any future without sustainability, and that one is quite literal. Thank you.